All right, welcome to the February 19th, can you believe it? Meeting of the Lifeboat Academy Coordination Circle. And as is our custom, I will start with a land acknowledgement unless anyone else wants to take it on. Um, Not seeing anyone jump at it. I was, and I don't mean to cast dispersions, but I experienced the conventional version of land acknowledgement today, and boy, I really appreciate ours, and or one that has a little bit more connection to it. And so I will dip into ancient indigenous wisdom to remind us that the land was here before we were, and the land will continue to be here long after we are gone. And everything that we know and experience comes from the land and returns to the land. And even our bodies right now are made up of little temporary bits of the land that are only temporarily in our possession. And so when we are talking about acknowledging the land, we're actually talking about acknowledging our interconnection, our interbeing with all of our relations. And we lean on long traditions which recognize that anytime we come together, it's really just effective and a good idea to remind ourselves of what we have in common, and that we have more in common than we have that separates us, and that whatever we do, whatever work we do, is in this larger um, context of a longer enduring land of which we are evolving, an evolving part. And with that comes also a reminder that our primary job here is to manage our relations, to tend to the things that care for us, the beings that care for us, and to heal any harms that may have happened, regardless of where those harms came from, and to do everything in our power to prevent causing harm as we move forward. So, with that, it would be uh, irresponsible to not acknowledge the long-standing harms that have happened to indigenous peoples, the keepers of this wisdom. And actually, I'm going to add, and all of the victims of colonization um, and oppressive systems. Lots of us out here have experienced long intergenerational harms. So we are the wounded tending to the wounded, and let that soften our hearts. So may we do what we can, where we can, when we can, to leave the place a little better than we found it. And I invite us to take a moment just to ground yourself literally and metaphorically. So make yourself comfortable, do whatever you feel you need to create the right environment for yourself. And just take a moment to be a body in a place. Take a moment to feel the weight of your body pressing down on the seat beneath you, those points of contact coming up, the ground and your seat, the feeling of the clothing on your skin, the temperature of the air, sounds and smells in the room where you are. And you might start to notice your breath, a reminder of reciprocity, effortless reciprocity, always there, whether you notice or not. Fresh oxygen, fresh energy coming in with the in-breath, the body expanding. And then the body relaxing and releasing the spent carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide becomes nutrition for our green relatives who exhale their spent oxygen back to us. And in this way, we all swim in this atmosphere that we co-create together. So I invite you to take another deep breath in, feeling the fresh energy, and then a long exhale, letting go of whatever no longer serves you. And in your own time, find your way back to the circle. Oh, Heather's here. Hello, hello.
Hello.
We just did our land acknowledgement and grounding, so you're here for the check-in. And did anyone have a good check-in question for today? Oh, Roland.
Just a second here.
So where you are right now, what is the element of the place that you are? No, hang on. Yeah, what element do you feel in your body that relates to the place where you are right now?
So earth, wind, fire, metal, etc.
Cedar, cedar, basalt, um, uh, anything.
Okay. So the circle as I see it is April, Roland, Heather, and me. And so check in, a chance to say hi, and what element are you feeling where you are right now? And you can always pass. We'll come back to you. April, over to you.
Um, I'm feeling sunshine where I am right now. I'm not sure if that's an element, but it's it's very prominent anyway. On to Roland, I think.
Yep.
Uh, I am feeling uh, cold um, sea breeze, wintry sea breeze. Over to Heather.
Yeah, I'm feeling chilly and not great.
Mhm.
Mm,
Stuffed up and scratchy throat and whatever it is.
Mm.
So I'm kind of cuddled up in bed, joining you from there.
well,
You too, you, Ben.
hopefully, we can be some virtual vitamin C or some virtual lemon juice for you. Um, what element am I feel? I am feeling. Um, I'm a little bit sleep deprived, and it's making me feel foggy. So, what would that be? A combination of water and air, blended in equal parts. So, I'm that's my mixture for the day. All right. So I'm gonna propose. We don't really have, or let me say, I don't have anything on specifically on the agenda today other than a quick check-in on where things are, and last time we talked about our roadmap for 2026. So that can be a place for us to go back to the roadmap and then just sort of do updates based on that. And as is our custom, we usually start by revisiting our North Star, and I think that would be a lovely thing to do. But th those are, I'm going to say that's my gentle proposal is that we revisit our North Star and we do a quick update on where things are. And this round is basically what do you need for what would make this time feel valuable to you? Um, do my ideas work for you? And is there anything you'd like to add to the agenda? So over to you, April.
Nothing to add. Thank you. What you've said sounds fine to me. So on to Roland.
So this is where if we want to add anything to the agenda,
Hmm.
um, I had a couple of two things that I wanted to maybe talk about. One of them is uh, attendance to this meeting and the finance meeting, and the other one is I've been thinking about we've presentations and reconnecting with the Pender community.
Mm.
So I don't want to start talking about them right now, so I'm trying to be short and cryptic,
To keep the mystery alive.
or concise and cryptic. I know I'm short in terms of how I speak. I want to be concise and cryptic. concise but cryptic. So over to Heather. Oh, you're muted.
I don't have anything to add. I'm here because I'm in good company.
Yay!
Ben.
Oops. Okay. I think that works, especially the presentations. There are a couple things on the roadmap that I think where those questions will fit in. And now we've got them specifically out there. And I was just going to take notes and on our revisiting the North Star, but um, I'm having this old joke. I just wash my hands and I can't do a thing with them. Anyhow, uh, so our typical way of doing the North Star question is three basic questions that you can choose to answer any part of them, any one, or all three, or any combination. But those questions are, what are we trying to do together? Why is that important? And where are we now? And we do two rounds, one for the initial share, and then what are you hearing? What are you noticing? And what other people are saying. So with that and you can always pass and we'll come back to you. So April, over to you. What's your North Star read today?
My North Star read today says that what we're doing is coming together to establish an academy and also a place-based location where lots of things can happen and are happening, and attempting to make all of that sustainable. Over to Roland.
Uh, yeah, I think I'm going to pull back an even bigger picture. I think what we're doing is we collectively we're learning how to live well, and it's important because uh, we have forgotten, and it is the forgetting is poisonous. And what's the last part?
Where are we now?
Where are we now? Oh, maybe that's where we are now, is that we're learning how to do it together. So maybe my first statement is my last statement, but my middle statement stands. Over to Heather.
Yeah, I like that. We're learning together. Um, I'm in, I feel I'm in many situations where, how to, it's so hard to articulate, but it feels like we're just only in kindergarten when it comes to how we are together, how we take care of each other, how we I think that's almost all I can say right now. It's like it seems like seems so mysterious to people how they can do things differently.
Mm,
Even with the network of nonprofit organizations, it doesn't seem very much different than the mainstream to me.
Mm.
So ways. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's I guess maybe that's also where we are now. I think I'll add to the where we are now is finding finding ways of identifying where people are on their learning journey,
Mm.
which is really tricky because one of the ways that I'm thinking about this is that the reason why it seems so mysterious to people is that we've been trained in this very ideological story about the world. And it's us and them, and it's all about. I'm reading Gabor Mate right now, the Myth of Normal, and he lays out that we have a basic human need for integrity and belonging, and we've created a culture where we think those things are oppositional. That the only way that you can belong is to abandon your integrity. And so we often feel like we're in this struggle between being true to ourselves and fitting in. And most people have abandoned being true to themselves to fit in because belonging is security. Not belonging is being cast on the ice floe, you know. And so most people are so alienated from their own truth that and actually not just alienated, but to the point where inviting people into that feels really threatening. And so I think part of where we are right now is I too was raised that way, and I too have challenges figuring out what it means to be in integrity with myself, because it's easy to confuse being in integrity with being strident, being dominant and getting your own way and that kind of stuff. So I think part of what we're learning together, in that process of learning together, we're also trying to figure out who's actually trying to learn that. Because a lot of people aren't really interested in learning that. Um, and I think that's where I think that's where one plausible explanation of why sustainability is challenging right now is because we're still trying to figure out how to identify what's the secret handshake that what's our secret handshake so that we can identify people who are trying to learn to live well from people that are just trying to keep the status quo alive. So um, that was unexpected, but that seems really all of a sudden there's like, oh, there's like a click here for me. So we've all had a chance to share. So we do our second round, which is really just reflection. What are you noticing? What's resonating with you? What's coming up for you? Over to you, April.
What I think resonating with me is we all seem to be questioning a number of things, which is not a bad thing to question it. And for me, I know that I need some time to process what I'm questioning. So that's kind of what's coming up at the moment. Over to Roland.
I think that we are, what's coming up for me about what we've been talking about is that we are responsive to the irritation
Mm,
we're noticing and gathering around it. Oh, we're making a pearl. Collectively, we are all little elements of a pearl. Over to Heather.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah, for me, what's come up, and it doesn't seem to really fit in, but this is what's come up anyway. And that is, I belong to a number of pretty tight core groups that are just like responsible for something together. Foodlands is one, Lifeboat's another, the Langley Farmers Institute is another. In all of those groups, there are kind of like 5 strong people aligned and trusting. And I'm really, really wanting to expand the group. And I'm feeling, let me just say what's come up here is that we went to a presentation that a group of people were making to the township of Langley to do a rodeo site on this land, farmland, that the township has acquired. And I reported this at another meeting Ben was at, and I was pretty irritated by it and whatever. But I came away, it's so weird for me. I came away excited to be collaborating with this group. I could see the movement that they'd been moving to having this rodeo site on this land, to looking at the history and involving the 4-H and involving other people. I'm playing politics here, feeling like I am the NDP that is negotiating with the Liberal Party, right? That I'll come and support you if you bring in the dental plan, right? It's kind of like I don't cross over into that world. And I found myself kind of fairly easily finding commonality, common ground, with the people, and thinking that, yeah, like, the world I live in is small. It's really, really small. And here I am in the township of Langley, and here are all these farmers and all these people doing things and voting conservatively always. And somehow I have an in or a connection
Mm,
or a way of thinking of it as being more than, the community farm that we had anticipated. And
mm,
part of that is true that I couldn't see us doing it. We don't have the time, the resources, the capacity. We certainly don't have the money to create the kind of community farm. But they've got deep pockets. I mean, they've got all those horse owners and all
mm,
of that, and they want this. And we can take the agricultural area of that farm and do something with it in terms of food security and growing food and bringing our community into it. So this is all very new and it's not very well formed, and I haven't processed it, April, but there's something there about me not wanting to isolate myself as much as I have
Mm.
from the
mm,
mainstream, and on the other hand, not be corrupted by it or conned by it or bought by it. I think I can leave it at that.
mhm.
A lot of processing to do I mean, to find that the mayor is on our side, even for some small thing, is kind of exciting,
Mm,
you know? Like he doesn't want to actually approve their project unless we cooperate, and else we get some food growing on that. Anyway,
mm.
in process. Yeah, over to Ben.
Yeah, this is it feels really relevant and timely. I was coming into the meeting today wondering if I'm and we'll get into the updates and all that kind of stuff, but um I think this is you're kind of putting your finger on part of the tension that I feel all the time around, with the Pharmastery and the Lifeboat Academy. Are we asking too much? Is it too big? Do we scale it back? Should I be blending with other projects? And and there's a part of me like I'm aware of other projects but many of them, they don't feel like there's a fit. There doesn't feel like there's an invitation for me to do my part or what I think of as my part. And I feel like I think I am interested in collaboration and also with some non-negotiables, you know. Um, and I feel like the non-negotiables aren't my way or the highway. They're actually like we work as peers and no one extracts from others. It's like some people aren't treated as special and other people discarded. that doesn't seem like a big ask. Anyhow, I think this is it's interesting because it's it's a constant challenge to feel into if there's room to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about here. And April and I were having this conversation. Actually, this is April and my third meeting today, so I'm going to get confused on who said what when. But but what I we had an interview today, and one of the questions was sort of what keeps you motivated to do this work. And my answer was when I'm in a room when people honestly collaborate, I get really excited, you know. And there is for me, there's a physical opening up, shoulders come down, language gets softer, people start using more language about what I care about, stories about their experiences. And it's transformative. And I just get so frustrated when I'm not in that situation, that I feel like I'm almost incapable of sitting through those other kinds of encounters. And they're just so common. It's more the norm that, you're expected to sort of, check a box kind of thing. So, anyhow, that's what's coming up for me from all of this. And this is feeling hey, the system works. It's really how useful it is to visit your North Star from time to time. All right, awesome. So I'm gonna share screen and um, this is actually I didn't click this closed from last time, but I think and then I added Roland's notes. There are a lot of items, most of the items from our previous list are checked off at the moment. And last time we talked through our roadmap, and I'm just going to bring that up. The roadmap is the combination of the work that we've done in the Finance Guild, the work that we did as part of the annual plan at the end of last year, and even before that, a lot of the conversations that we had about outreach strategies and communication and a lot of the things that involved Aiden, bringing Aiden in for messaging and things like that. So to just start, I'm going to go over the high level. So I like doing it this way. We have, I think it's six. So we have sort of six areas that we're trying to work on simultaneously. Many of them overlap. So securing the land is kind of our main goal and resourcing the lifeboat. So even if we can't secure the land, that the lifeboat can float someplace else. Um, Living invitations, which is about outreach and those presentations that Roland was talking about, and Heather expanding the circle. The Lifeboat Builder activation, which is we say that we're all about supporting lifeboat builders, but we haven't done much to get that happening this year. And then the Pharmastery as more of um, last year was about testing out the retreats, and we're hoping this year, if the stars align, that we can start to use the Pharmastery experience as a way of uh, possibly recruiting timeshare croppers and also getting some paying guests to come in, plus also, living the Pharmastery. And then the last one is self-governance as a service, which is really about the Lifeboat Academy, kind of a different way of saying, what is it that we're trying to do with the Lifeboat Academy, and how would we package that for people who don't want to join the Lifeboat Academy but are doing their own projects and still interested in how do we work well together. Um, so those are the main areas. And actually, especially Heather, you weren't here last time. So any questions about this? Does it make sense?
It totally makes sense. It also makes sense. I think it overlaps with so much with Foodlands. And
Yeah.
also you're probably being informed by one informs the other.
Yeah.
But also other community farms. I mean, the process. I mean, putting up the securing of the land, whatever that means, that's really the foundation,
Hmm.
which we have a kind of forever place to be, right? and then
Yeah.
all the resources and people who needed to make that happen. And,
Yeah.
and then the active daily life of it and how we come together and decide what's important and decide who's going to do the work and support each other to do the work when things go south and all of that. So I like it a lot. The high level of it is I can go back to it and say, yeah, how are we doing on all these fronts? And for me, how do people that we're working with fit into this? What is their kind of priority right now?
Mhm.
Might be they don't have the land or they need to, like I just see all the community farms I work with, fitting into that kind of matrix. So good.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a huge one of the question, the more confusing question for me is where does the Lifeboat Academy end and Foodlands begin? Like because there's a lot of overlap. So in terms of securing the land, um, what we're wanting to reach out to Steph to get sort of final details on what she needs so that as we're talking to other people who might be investors, we've got concrete numbers. Um, Outreach to investors, and that's both to big investors and timeshare croppers. And the big investors are people like Chris and Joey and Steph, I would actually include as, because she may be willing to have a negotiated financing arrangement that makes her sort of a short-term big investor. Um, and then the timeshare croppers, and the idea behind having some conversations with them is if I were a big investor, I would feel more comfortable if I knew there were more small investors who were willing to come on board and sort of a demonstration of possibility. And then pressing the button on incorporation. And I can tell you as of this afternoon, Becca and I have finalized all of the dotting I's and crossing T's, and it's off to Bill. And there were more I's and more T's. There are There's amazing how many I's there can be in one little document. But we've got it all, and we did catch it was one of these things too where the more you look at one thing, you find this other, and it wasn't even loose threads. Like one of them, the last one I discovered was there's a line that was about stewardship council qualifications, and it said uh, steward qualifications. That was it. So we finished that line, and and none of them changed anything substantively, but we did cross the I's and dot the T's. So anyhow, that's off to Bill. So that is moving forward. In fact, I think, yep. Um, and we also have I've drafted emails to invite Steph and Joey and Chris to a conversation. And we have a finance guild meeting tomorrow, and we'll be talking about that. So that's moving forward as well. And yeah, I think that's kind of the update in that area. So I'm going to pause there and just see any questions or comments. Guess I don't see no one jumping. All right. Resourcing the lifeboat. There's a couple parts here. One is really practical, and that's just coming up with some budgeting um, numbers in part so that we can actually think about how much money would we need in the bank to cover 2026 so that we have some security. And we're looking at specifically, we already have the budget for our regular operating expenses. We know without doing any projects and without any unexpected expenses, we know what our monthly needs are. And we have a list of improvements that if we had more money, we would like what the priorities would be. And we just need to go through and kind of cost out what those are. And then the last bit that we want to do, which is throwing darts at a dartboard in the dark, is clarifying what some income pathways might be, especially looking at the pharmastery as retreat guests. What kind of income might we expect this year? And then the uh, self-governance as a service. So, where might there be some income there? And I will put out for the gods and whoever, if anyone else has ideas for income pathways, um, we're, totally open to that, including grants if we can figure out. And that might be something once we're incorporated, we may qualify for grants that we don't qualify for as just independent individuals. Um, so that's that part. And then the other part, and approaching potential caretakers, right now there's two people who are, um, I think we're curious about whether they could become caretakers. Um, and we're just having continuing conversations there. Um, I feel like I'm aware that we're recording, but I don't think this is a kind of a breach. Actually, I won't name names, but I will say they are both people that we have who've come to the farm, who've spent time here, who we've worked with, who we like, and we feel good working with, and who are aligned and definitely have a lot to contribute. And it's a question of how one is um, collapse aware and sort of recently collapse aware, and so is doing a lot of thinking around where does she want to be and how to move quickly. And one of her big concerns for here is she wants something stable that she can land in. And it's our instability. I think if we were up and running, I think she'd probably be here. But the instability again is a limiting factor. And the other one is has sort of a currently has a situation that is generally working, but not 100% satisfied and is thinking about alternatives. And actually, I will say we have another contact who is one of our network partners, who it turns out is on Salt Spring right now, testing out an intentional community on Salt Spring. And so I think we both had the thought, well, Pender's nearby, and and
Yeah.
if that doesn't work out, maybe she'd be interested here. Anyhow, and I think the one of the things about the caretakers is also giving Roland and I some relief from being 24/7 responsible for everything. And in the plan B, and I don't know, Heather, if you're listening in or but this is also where Foodlands and all of the community farms comes in because thinking about there are other really interesting projects out there. Is there a way of how do we combine forces and what might be some of the potentials there? Um, and the other thing I'm just going to say, as this is a bit of an update in terms of the IFOT training or ITFL training, Norm Leach is hosting a really big event. Apparently, about 1,000 people come to this shared dinner that is a multicultural interfaith dinner on March 9th in Vancouver, that is all about mental health healing in the land. And that's also in terms of it's not even really plan B. It's actually part and parcel of the pharmastery is and maybe the income stream for the pharmastery is there a way of sort of formalizing an ITFL retreat experience, and that can be kind of our calling card. So I'll do the same thing in terms of resourcing the lifeboat. Are there any questions or comments? I'm just doing popcorn style, so.
Okay, so yeah, I think that there's a lot we can do. I mean, you and I should have a conversation, independently about Foodlands and whatever, and
Mm,
and just get I get clear what we're asking for, because I do come up with a lot of people who might be in a position to explore the kind of, immediately I thought, oh my God, the young African group that are
Mm,
just like they've formed their own co-op. They're having some difficulty with it. They don't have land, but the two of them are so amazing couple that it actually, really just need to have a place to do what they do and what they want to do, which is a
mm,
full combination of growing and education and, and he's got practical skills. He repairs bicycles and there's just, so I just, when I meet these people and they're kind of looking for something, looking for a place, I need to be clear about, who I should just say, why don't you check out Lifeboat,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And
Cool. Let's
it's
yeah,
like,
let's schedule that conversation. That'd be
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
Nope.
All right, moving on. Living invitations. So, there are three parts to this. One is updating the website. Yeah, Roland, you're muted.
I just thought of something for the resourcing lifeboat, the lifeboat, and um, yeah, you were talking earlier about um, uh, sort of blending groups or joining other groups or and I think that this is something that comes up every once in a while, where it would be great to have hive mind kind of thinking around it. Like, what does that look like? Does it make sense to like what are the kinds of associations or what does that look like? Um, I was curious about other organizations. Um, in BC, in Canada, and internationally that might be aligned with the type of work that we're doing. And and then I thought, well, okay, so what? So
Hmm.
what if there are these other organizations? What do we do with them? So that I think that could be an interesting conversation, an interesting direction to explore.
I've got a question. I've got a thought and a question. And the thought is this also the marketing for hippies framework. The actual marketing is kind of what you're talking about, which is you find nodes, which are people who represent a web of relations. And then you find if there's something that we can offer them
Mm,
for their group, which could be a webinar or a talk or something like that, or even a facilitated, like it could be that we facilitate a conversation among their members to for whatever. But we find some place that we have something to offer to their folks. And then in offering it, that's our marketing. Because then once we're having that conversation, we see what ideas come up. But I like the idea. So anyhow, I think that from in part, this reminds me of the living invitations part, reaching out to these networks and to these other projects. And I also do think a hive mind conversation makes sense. And the question is, who should be in that conversation or where does that conversation happen? So do you have any thoughts on that?
me?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, uh,
I guess would this
who's
be like an outreach guild? If we had a functioning outreach guild now, would that be a conversation for them or?
Oh gosh, in that respect, um, I have not thought that far. Yeah.
And it's not a requirement. I've got it. I just want to capture the ideas, and that's why I'm adding tasks here, so we can figure that out later. But
Well,
it's
and it kind of it's also part of the talking. I wanted to talk about the meetings that we're having Uh, right now there are two meetings and yeah, yep. So I feel like it kind of ties into that, and I don't know if I should talk about that now or wait until later because I think I'll wait until later because I think it would detract from continuing with what we're doing.
Okay, and we can always come back to stuff too. All right, so let's move on then to the living invitations. So there are three parts to this. One is just updating the website based on what we've already agreed to in terms of the marketing for hippies. It's just a way of reorganizing the actual site that is aligned with marketing for hippies, and we can take that, hopefully that there is some value in that. Um, and so that's really just a technical job. Like we have the content, we just have to put it on the website. We also have an old action item from even last year, which is preparing what's new and an invitation. But it makes sense anytime, and especially if we are about to incorporate any opportunity where we can say, "Hey, here's where we are. This is, the latest development, and here's specifically what we're asking people to come into." And I think this kind of loops in with Roland's question about attendance at meetings right now. We used to have a reasonably active outreach guild and a reasonably active heartwork guild and finance. And now we just have finance. But finance is taking on some outreach stuff. And anyhow, so that's a question about who does the work and how do we, and maybe part of the invitation is, and the lifeboat builder activation is, can we, what do you call that, buttonhole a couple people to say, Austin's been interested in getting more involved, and can we um, offer some structured coaching in exchange for some specific outreach kind of activity? Um, Anyhow, so that's a to be developed part of that task. And then this is one of the things in that marketing for hippies framework. We want to find opportunities where we can tell our story to people who might be some of our stakeholders. And we already have a combination of webinars and presentations and materials. We do have an official menu of offerings from the Lifeboat Academy. I think there's like six or seven webinars that they're already developed. They already have slideshows. They're ready to go. And we're looking for opportunities to do that to audiences who would be interested, where to audiences where there may be individuals who would be interested in joining us further. Um, I will be doing a workshop in 2 days on Saturday in Victoria for the Co-op Housing Federation of BC. And they've asked me to do navigating via tensions. And so I'll be doing that there. So that actually counts as one of our winter events. Um, and actually, I think I want to count April's the presentation that you did at the one where you connected with Marta. Uh,
Oh, the Montreal,
yeah, at the CAG.
yeah,
Um,
strengthening collective whatever it
yeah,
was.
strengthening collective impact.
Yeah,
So, which is kind of the self-governance as a service, right? So
yeah.
that's how that kind of fits in there. But and we were saying 2 to 3, and the more the merrier, right? This is actually one of those areas where the more we can get in front of people who could be allies, the better. The it's always about playing the percentages. So that's the living invitations part. Any questions or comments there? All right, moving on, and we can always come back. So Lifeboat Builder activation, this one we have I guess we have materials to go out. They still haven't gone out, right? Or did you send them out?
I haven't.
Okay. So we have emails ready and a basically an offering for what it would be to be a lifeboat builder this year. And I wonder if we have a link to it. Um, hang on a second. I just want to, partly for my own edification, a reminder.
And I haven't because I've been more focused on trying to get responses for the Stewardship Council emails.
Mhm.
But I probably should just, you know,
Do it. Yeah.
just
Yeah.
do it.
Well, and actually, one of the things that Roland and I have been doing is a regular. It's still a nascent habit, so it kind of happens more or less. But we've been trying to have a weekly meeting where we talk about outreach, and the big focus has been Stewardship Council. So emails have gone out to everyone on our Stewardship Council just as a reminder and a check-in. And they're all personalized. We have a template, but then it gets personalized for the particular circumstances.
Yeah,
And
I think you both should have received one.
Yes.
So a
yeah.
response would be great.
Well, you got one from April.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you can do a verbal response too.
Are,
That's what.
are the emails going into us? Because I just look at the.
No, they're all in the inbox.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, there's April's right there. Um,
Ah,
so
sure.
um,
I love it.
um, So this is the basically what we're offering for 2026, and it's refined from what we learned for last year. And in particular, it's trying to put more structure around people because that seems people are needing a little bit more, well, hand-holding, really. Like people need a little, it's more coaching. Um, so there's the this is using that marketing for hippies language about, there might be a fit if, and there isn't a fit if, and then what we're talking about doing. So um, it's really yeah. So the basic idea is this year, rather than trying to do a bunch of group events first, we want to do individual, like sort of intake, come and have a meeting with us, talk about what you have in mind. We develop a little bit of a plan together with some check-in points. And then once we know that, then we start bringing people together into more, collective events. So in a way, the materials are, and the first level is sending out to people who are already on our list, who've been lifeboat builders, and just say, how's this look to you? If you got something like this, would it resonate with you or not? And then using that feedback to say, and if is there anybody that you can think of you'd like to invite? Um, so that's pretty much it for the lifeboat builder part. And same any at this point it is primarily sending out emails and then seeing what develops from it. And yeah, that's where that's at. And I will say also, I think in our grand scheme of priorities, this is not it's not high up on the list. This is probably one of our lower priorities. And from a what's in it for us perspective, the hope is that if we get some people who we don't need many people to help lighten the load in terms of people that are willing to take on some tasks. So questions, comments on the lifeboat builder part? All right. Farmistery guests and timeshare croppers. Um, I will say this is probably underdeveloped in terms of like an action plan. We, yeah, right now we haven't really thought through it in any great detail. We'll keep on keeping on with inviting woofers, and the website will provide a more clear entry point for people who just want to come for a retreat or a stay, to come be a Farmistery guest. So, in terms of humble goals, if we could get, a handful of guests this summer, that would feel like, movement in the right direction. Questions, comments?
How many is a handful? Is that like 5 or 6?
Yeah, yeah, I think. I mean, last year we had what, 20 woofers? Is it something like that?
Something
20
like that, yeah.
under 30.
Yeah.
And if we could convert, so I don't think we want to necessarily have many more visitors than we had last year, but we're hoping instead of it all being woofers, that 5 or 6 of those turn into guests.
Yeah.
Um, Something like that. Anything else? All right, self-governance as a service. Um, this one is not underdeveloped. It's just not here. But I think this is, most of what April and I do together kind of goes in this category. And actually, I would say a lot of what I'm trying to do with Foodlands is also in that same category. So a lot of what we're doing around sort of sociocracy and the learning pods for Foodlands is the same concept of, but I think the one difference is April and I are trying to, community farms often don't have much of a budget for this. So, part of the marketing is to figure out where there might be some groups that have more of a budget. Um, that and Heather, just to bring you up to speed, so April presented something that we developed for another group, altered it for this Canadian Association of Gerontology conference that was in Montreal. After that presentation, Marta, who is the executive director of the uh, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario, EAPO, came up and basically hired April on the spot and said, we need your help. And the first meeting today that we had at 6:30 a.m. because it was Ontario, it was 10 in Ontario, but it was early for us, was, a paid contract to do some facilitation for them around the ideas that we're developing as the lifeboat. So we're just looking for more opportunities to do that. And April's been doing all sorts of, so you also got us a spot at the Never conference in April. And so that continues to be like looking for opportunities where we can present or talk to people, and then basically, and that's our short, sharp, and shiny experiments is, the way that we're trying to pitch that. Um, and I think that's also, so we're trying to figure out, it's the same content, but it is packaged in a different way that it's more appealing to kind of more, I mean, these aren't mainstream nonprofits. Well, it's actually what you were talking about, Heather. It's like a lot of nonprofits really are kind of mainstream. And so, how do we package this in a way that the language doesn't feel off-putting? And we're not going to talk about climate change or collapse as a starting point for those groups. Uh, Anyhow, so just look to see. Right. And then it's a similar plan here, is trying to figure out where we can do 2 or 3 pilots. And we already have, actually, we've created the offer page for the short, sharp, and shiny experiments, which can, it's always a moving target. So questions and comments there?
Would coaching fit in that self-governance as a service thing? Like individual coaching?
I think it could, yeah. I mean, we haven't talked about that, but we try the way we sell this is we want to, like with EAPO, we did this gig this morning, but the intention is that we will be ongoing consultants with them. And so that turns into a kind of coaching kind of arrangement.
Hmm.
April, you want to say anything more about that?
Well, I was just going to say that um, yeah. So so some of the coaching we'll be doing is not about what we're meeting here about the probably. However, the content and what it is that we're helping people to get their heads around is exactly all of this kind of stuff, all the social underpinnings of this whole operation. So the content's the same. We might call it something different, but you know, coaching is just delivering one to one what we deliver in groups as well.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, actually, way back. Um, the I don't even know how long back, at least 10 years. The first contact I had with Sociocracy 3.0 was actually something called Sociocracy 341. And it was how to use the concepts of sociocracy for a like personal development coaching
Oh,
kind of system. Um, and I think that was where we started to see how those things could kind of weave together. Any other comments or questions?
Hmm.
I will say that um, if we can figure out the way to leverage it, this is, in terms of income potential, this has the highest short-term income potential of all of the things that we're talking about. So if I could, if I would um oh, this is the problem though, is I don't know how we actually, it's just like anything else, putting more time and effort into it won't necessarily yield more projects. There's a sort of serendipity in where the way open is. Um, but in terms of resourcing the lifeboat, this seems like the one that has the highest potential for bringing cash in 2026. All right, well that is our update, and I think oh, Roland, you were saying something about um, oh, reconnecting with the Pender community.
mm,
So, do you
it
want
is.
to?
Well, we recently went to uh, a a peace march on Pender, and I was thinking about um, there were a lot of people there who at one point were much more closely involved with, I guess, us. Um, and um, and so I was thinking about um, you know, reconnecting to the community, not specifically that's been the end of a long travel day for me. Not specifically those people, but now that we're relaunching the lifeboat um, uh, stuff in terms of buying the property, and we've got the bylaws well on their way and incorporation happening soon and all of that stuff to think about Pender as the Pender community as kind of um, a first stop or a intro for us test group, maybe. So that's what I was thinking. That's as far as I got.
Okay. I will say my experience, and it's sort of trauma experience, the hardest audience you'll ever play to are friends and family.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of the Pender community goes into that category of ironically, they tend to be a lot more critical than than other audiences.
Yeah, well, it was also what Heather was saying earlier about uh, nonprofits being quite conventional or conservative, and
Mm,
it's the same, where it's people that seem to be, want peace and want to do something about climate and are very conventional in the way that in their approach. Um, so, yeah.
You can still use them as a fertile ground for updating, though. I think
Mm.
with these groups, this category of folks doing um, the lightest touch for a
Yeah.
connection that you can do,
Yeah.
and then go from there. So I'm thinking if I was going to the Peace March, I might take some postcards with me that have 5 points about what's new at
mm,
with us, and just kind of pass those out to people without a big deal.
mm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about uh, not necessarily presentation, like a general presentation that we would use for everyone, but what would fit, where.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the ideas, what came from to mind for me, and this is that whole chicken and the egg thing, is more just social events where we're inviting, and especially if in an ideal world we have a fair number of woofers and guests, and we have more than just us um, caretaking on the property, and we have enough capacity that we could have a weekly or monthly,
Yeah.
like a weekly potluck or bi-weekly potluck or monthly come visit the farm day, and it's open house kind of thing, and more than anything, it's really just a social event, and that also, and then we can have the postcards there, or the recent newsletter just sitting on the table if anybody wants to look at it. So that's also kind of a possibility. The only thing that makes me hesitate is on capacity, for being able to plan events.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Ben, is that something low key, something you're doing anyway, something that you have somebody on Pender that likes a venue, some kind of social thing, whether it's a tour of the farm or potluck or people need a place to I don't know, have a concert in your hall or something like that, that you don't have to do a lot of organizing for, but will bring people in. And it becomes
Mm,
a place, say, particularly, I think if it's an active event rather than a promotion. What you say is completely true. It's like the people on my own farm don't, you know, necessarily aren't I think I do a low key promotion because I get lots of feedback if I'm doing something that sounds aspirational,
Mm.
you know, when really it's like when we actually do something. I mean, I think for Pender, and I say this for all the community farms, let's think of a signature event that makes sense on Pender, makes sense with you guys and you do it once a year.
Mm,
And don't try and do it something every month. Once a season is great, but even twice a year or whatever, what would make sense for Pender? What would make sense for the lifeboat that would just be able to invite the whole community to?
The problem here is you can't find a weekend where there isn't something happening already. It's very active.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, I get that. And maybe that means that you combine
Hmm.
you
that's
combine, right? It's
yeah.
like on Salt Spring they have an apple festival. Well, they go to a number of different farms on, to take you could be a farm involved in something that's already happening too.
Yeah.
I don't know, Pender, you do.
well, and we were
Yeah.
involved in something in the Nettle Fest.
Yes, I remember going to the Nettle Fest. Well, that's perfect. Just have a higher profile. Be
Yeah.
seen there.
Dress up like nettles.
Or just burn people with acid.
Whatever.
And we have that reminds me that I'm saying this more to Roland, but we do have nettle out there that's already ready to harvest.
Oh, okay.
Wow, that you're ahead of us.
Yeah, well, it was, and I saw it like a week or two ago. I mean, it's still, it's like it's just at that stage, but I was really surprised. And actually, the thing I'm going to add onto that list is just doing regular circles.
Hmm.
I
Mm.
think there is, and the CJ group, and it's funny because I'm always I now just shut up, but everyone, uh, you know, it doesn't matter that you're doing a Zoom call with people from different parts of the country. Everyone will say, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we could do this in person?" And then they wax poetic about the in-person meetings, which are, you know, impossible to organize, but we could really easily just have a once a week, once a month circle on the farm. We do them anyhow.
Yeah.
We could even have them as drop-in, sort of drop-in circles.
Well,
Um,
and the question with that is how to let people know about it, like where to
mm.
post it, or how
Well, and I
to
wonder
get
if
the
we
invitation.
can probably, once we incorporate, that could be an opportunity to reach out to the Pender Post. And they pretty much just do, you don't pay to do an article in the Pender Post as long as you're an organization on the island.
Cool.
I think that when with incorporation there should absolutely be a celebration,
Hmm.
an
Mm.
house, a celebration, food, whatever, and information on how you could get involved. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're coming up on time, and I think that what this is making me think is actually going back to Roland's question about attendance at the meetings and um, again, the chicken and the egg of we're a small group and we have and how do we engage some more people, get some more activity so we get more hands to do some of this work. We tried, I was really careful working with Aiden in developing the annual plan that it's scaled. So these are all things that, and the numbers and everything are scaled. So if no one else shows up, Roland and I can keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
And but having said that, having more people would make things easier and um, so but then we get into I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to recruit anybody. I don't want to recruit anybody actually. I don't think that that's really doesn't particularly work. But for the people who are in our orbit, is there a way that we can get them more engaged? Which I think is actually the lifeboat builder stuff. I think that's really maybe it's nothing more than just prioritizing that outreach to potential lifeboat builders.
Yeah.
And for the lifeboat builders, I just sent it to the Lifeboat Academy list, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can go through the CRM too and see if there's anybody else that, you know, that we want to send it to. But it's not like outreach to, I mean, eventually we can also do something with the newsletter and send it out to MailChimp. Ronnie has stepped back because they're finding with the seminary they just can't. It's both seminary and lots of things are happening in Austin, and so Ronnie just doesn't have the time to be putting into it. But which is really a shame because they were so good at just getting the newsletter out, and we could kind of,
Oh, that's right, the newsletter. Okay.
That's something to recruit for sure. That's a
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
very distinct particular skill
Yeah.
that like that's finite, you know,
yeah, yeah,
seasonal. You could find someone that could do that.
yeah. All right. Well, I think yeah, let's do one round, any loose ends, last thoughts, and then one round to just say goodbye. So April, over to you. Any last thoughts, loose ends?
Not at the moment, but I'll be thinking about this. But I do get a sense that we're able to flesh out stuff in quite a realistic way, which is satisfying, I think. So, good work on us. Over to Roland.
Well, I was thinking because of the we are currently a small active number um of and proposing at the finance meeting tomorrow, depending on what y'all think tonight, of instead of having a coordination and a finance meeting, because we've talked a lot about it, a lot of things that have to do with finance also.
Yeah.
That could, you know, if Becca is available on Thursdays, and if Thursdays continue to work well for all of us, can we just consolidate and have the one Thursday meeting?
Or the consolidated meeting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever day works for everyone.
right.
Cool. Yeah.
So over to Heather.
Interesting you should say that was my immediate thought, Roland, is that I've kept track of these meetings and haven't attended and just felt I would like to, but it would be really nice. I think there's a lot of overlap, particularly since we've gone through the Constitution thing.
Mhm.
And getting into
Yeah.
finances now, it's like I wanted to have the conversation with you, Ben, on the side about people and how we engage the organizations, but that spills into, I mean, finances is a big thing for me.
Mhm.
How do we go and collaborate on grants?
Hmm.
Who's the best organization to go for the grant? How do we deal everybody else into it? How do we look at it in the bigger picture? I mean,
Mhm.
that's always my thoughts on financing too. So maybe just one coordination committee would be good, and
Mhm.
can take these jobs and do them as tasks, like as actions, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's for me. Oh, and I realize, and I should say this right now, Michael and I are going to be on the ferry at the same time of the meeting of the finance committee.
Oh,
I hate to say I'd forgotten that.
Okay.
It's happening at the same time. We're going over for his sister's wedding to Parksville, so I won't be on that call.
Okay. Well, good to know. And I think at this point, then maybe the big conversation is finding a time when we combine these two. Um, and I would like, the whole thing too is the beauty of sociocracy is it's the circles can, the media can combine, and then if we can, we're more likely to generate more activity if we can be clear on dividing out tasks and handing them off. And especially if we can hand them off to two people instead of one, you
Yeah.
know, and then that creates a little nascent circle and that can grow. So, go where the energy is.
Mhm.
So, yeah, let's keep it
Okay.
up.
So then tomorrow we can talk to Becca about having a consolidated meeting time. See if Thursday at this time works for her, but I think it's kind of late for her. But
It's probably this is 10. No, it's 3 hours, so 9 o'clock.
yeah, so we may have to do a
I'm really wide open. I'm
yeah.
really,
Oh,
I
So
think it's going to be Becca more than
yeah. Well, and April
and then
too.
April
and April. You may have to
yeah.
do as well, April. I don't know.
So we'll do the schedule game. Yay. I suggested it. I know.
We take April and Becca, we put them in a room. You
You
figure
figure it
it
out.
out and let us
Yeah,
know.
Actually,
Pick a
that might not
time.
be a bad idea. I'm
Actually,
going to think
yeah.
about that.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be checking in with Becca tomorrow, and then and we'll coordinate some sort of time that well, it sounds to me like we've made a decision, at least a tentative one, that we're going to try to combine those groups, and then the five of us will meet together, and then we'll be able to task out from there. We'll treat it like a coordination meeting, and it just makes total sense at this point. So.
And April, if you think, because you're the only other person like that, that's you and Becca are the only two people that are not like necessarily. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if we had one meeting, we might have an individual, like a half an hour, that just focuses on one issue that not everybody has to be there. But
Mm.
you schedule a meeting, and and according to the agenda, people may, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. We've done the community justice group has that's a pattern that we've settled on that works. It's been working pretty well, which is we try to do updates and quick things at the beginning of the meeting, first half hour, and then the next hour is one or two things that we go into. And it's that same agreement that the later stuff on the agenda, if you can just come for the updates and the high level stuff, and then if there's something we need to go into the nitty gritty, the people that are willing to do the nitty gritty stay and everyone else can leave. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think that we can use that kind of model. And we're a small enough group that we can just play it by ear, make it work.
sure.
All right. Well, excellent. And we're still just a little bit before time, and I'm totally am looking at I have to go do chickens, and then I'm gonna go. I'm putting the chickens to bed, and then I'm gonna go to bed, I think. So thank you all for being here, and just an opportunity to say good night. April, over to you.
Good night, everybody. Nice to spend time with you. We'll meet again in under some name of some circle. And
Soon.
yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, thank you all.
Well, good night, and until next time, and thank you for what felt like a generative conversation. Over to Heather.
Ditto for me too. I'll, s- I'll see you when I see you.
Awesome. All right,
Okay,
and Heather, I'll send you an email for setting up a meeting for us. Oh,
great.
pardon. Awesome. Thank you. See you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.